Now, as explained in the last lecture, you can use this special type here if you want to accept any type of value. Now, sometimes you want to accept any kind of value, but you still don't want to do something for all possible kinds of values that might be arriving. And that's why Go gives you a special version of the switch statement about which you already learned earlier in the course. Because you can not just use the switch statement, as you did learn it earlier, to take a look at some variable and then execute different code for different values that may be stored in that variable. But instead, in Go, you can also take a look at the type of a value with this special syntax. So you use the dot on the received value, and then in parentheses, you have the word type. Then, like always with switch statements, you add your curly braces, and then you can define different cases for the different types you might want to handle. And here you therefore now don't specify values that could be stored in this variable, but instead you specify different value types. For example, int. And then you would add the code that should execute if you do get a value of type int. For example, here we could then use println and output integer : value. And then we could also handle the case that it's maybe a float 64. So we could output float and then value. And then also handle the case that it's a string, in which case we maybe just want to output the value. And then we can set up a default case that will be executed for all other types. And here you could then add your fallback logic that should be executed if it is one of those other types. Or you don't specify a default clause and simply don't do anything for any other kind of value. So now, for example, here, print something will output something if we got a value of type int, a value of type float 64, or a value of type string. Any other value will be accepted, but nothing will happen in here. So back in our main function, these three print statements should have an effect, since we're providing an int, a float, and a string here. But if I, for example, also try to print my to-do here with print something, I can pass it to that function, because again, any type of value is allowed, but nothing should happen for this line of code. So therefore here, if we clear this and run this, we get this output here from the first three print statements. Then I enter my text here, but then here I only got the output I always got from the display method call. I did not get any output from print something here because we're not handling this to-do type. We can pass it to print something, but nothing will happen there. But it's also worth noting that the application also didn't crash and the Go compiler didn't complain. So we can pass it, but nothing happens.